Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, and I am joined once again by my good friend up north, Aram in Toronto.
Hello, I'm up north.
What's up, Aram?
So John Hollinger had an article that he wrote in The Athletic, which I think was really interesting. More interesting as a prompt to think about some things for the Warriors going forward. The article, just to really very briefly paraphrase, there's these teams who have signed older stars to extensions, like the Warriors signed Steph, but Kawhi signed the extension. Chris Paul signed an extension. He made the point that he can't fault the teams for signing them because if they didn't do it, then somebody else would. And that's totally true. Right? These are still star players, productive, and will be so for at least parts of their new contracts. He also wrote it in a way as kind of like a red flag for these teams and what does it mean for their kind of long-term prospects, especially for the teams that have not only signed people, but given up like major draft capital. He put the Warriors in this category of teams who are like, quote unquote, going for it. And what does that mean with aging stars? And we will have older players making a ton of money. But I don't think it's the same situation because we got these young dudes on the way. And it kind of got me thinking about Steph's contract is 4 years, right? Or 4 more years of Steph until he's 37 or 38. Of course, we still have Clay and Draymond, whose contracts don't go that far. But we got these young dudes this young core, which we've heard a lot of them talking about, like building a bridge to the next group or the next dynasty, if you want to get hyperbolic. So it got me kind of thinking, I'm going to throw Jordan Poole into it because I think he's like 22, 23, Wiseman's 20, Moody's 19, Kuminga's 18. I think we all will acknowledge that Clay is the most important player to the team this coming year. But I want to know what you think in 2 years. Who do you think is going to be the best player on the Warriors? And who do you think is going to be the most important player? Because it's not always the same, right? And then I want to know who you think is going to be the best player in 4 years, like the last year of Steph's contract, and who's going to be the most important player on the team in 4 years. So start with 2 years.
The best player in 2 years is probably still going to be Steph. I think he won't be who he was this past season, but his overall knowledge, his skill, we've always thought that would translate to his mid 30s to late 30s because of his just shooting and his ability to move without the basketball, run off screens, the way he stays in shape. I don't think any of the young guys will catch up to him in that respect. Again, like they'll be closer and Steph will come down a little bit naturally, but he'll still be the best player on the team if the roster, if this older core and this younger core stay together. I don't think that changes much at all. In 4 years, man, I'm hoping it'll be either James Wiseman or Jonathan Kuminga. I don't want to lose perspective on what I thought of James Wiseman when we drafted him. Right now, people are kind of tossing him aside. Obviously, they wanted to throw him in for cheap into any trade because they just don't really pay attention. They don't really care. And now it's like, oh, Jonathan Kuminga is the future. Wiseman, yes, but he's more of like, kind of like an accessory,
Mm-hmm.
And I still think he has a shot to be great. He didn't get a fair shake last season, and it's all about the churn of like the media hype and what have you done for me lately. So I think he has a shot, but in 4 years, I think it's probably going to be Wiseman or Kuminga. If I had to pick one, I would say Jonathan Kuminga. And that only goes towards the fact that I've said before, the one thing that concerns me most about James Wiseman is that he doesn't have enough dog in him. And so when I look at Wiseman, I look at Kuminga. Wiseman is a year and a half older than Jonathan Kuminga, but Kuminga, he has that dog in him. He has that like cockiness, that desire to be like a bad man, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I think would differentiate them, right? They both are super, super physically gifted and talented. I think maybe Kuminga's game comes a little bit more naturally to him from what I've seen, but he has a little bit longer way to go. 4 years is enough time to me to catch up to where he needs to be. And the other thing is that, not any fault of James Wiseman's, but I also picked Kuminga because at this point in history, he doesn't have any injuries. You know, I mean, knock on wood, James Wiseman, meniscus fine. You know, that's not like as devastating as like an ACL, of course, but it's an injury. It's a surgery. That's another checkbox on Jonathan Kuminga's side. But I would love for that debate to be raging in 4 years. Like if we go with their comps, it's like, oh, this I'm gonna sound foolish for this, but like, oh, it's like AD and Kawhi. Yeah, maybe not in 4 years yet, but we'll see.
Well, I would agree with you that in 2 years, I think Steph is still going to be their best player and probably still their most important player. Although, you know, I would say in 2 years, I think James Wiseman might be one of their most important players, because Draymond might be in decline and they need a defensive anchor. And so that's also why Wiseman would also be my answer for most important in 4 years, because by then definitely need to be this defensive anchor. And almost more than anything else, that's what he needs to be able to do, is to protect the rim, guard everybody, just be that anchor and be that big man unicorn who won't get played off the floor. And can he get there? I hope so. He's huge. And if you can keep a huge guy on the floor, and he does have real offensive skill, and I'm still hoping that 3-point shot comes around, that'll be amazing. And I also agree. I think in 4 years, Kuminga will be their best player, but I don't think Steph will be their best player, but he's still going to be really good and super important, just from like a leadership perspective, you know, and he's been compared to Tim Duncan so much. But that's, sometimes you need a template, right? And somebody who's productive late into their career, super important from a leadership perspective. And he's shown throughout his career to be a really important leader. And I don't expect that to change in 4 years. So if anything, it may be even more important, and more, and his leadership has even more weight by then as well. So, and then also, you know, just I don't think any of us think Moody's going to be a star, but, or Poole, you know, like, he probably still has a lot more upside, but, you know, you think about this stable of 4 dudes, if you think about the Philadelphia 76ers process, they had how many top draft picks, stable of young dudes, and they just needed 1 or 2 of them to hit. And, you know, Embiid he's a MVP candidate, right? So that hit a home run. So who knows if any of these 4 guys reach that level, but yeah, you just really need one of them to do it.
I actually, sorry, I didn't answer the most important player thing. I agree with you with all the Steph stuff. I mean, the Tim Duncan stuff we've been hearing for years, since Steve Kerr showed up and compared him to Tim Duncan. On that note, I was like, oh, I hope my Kawhi analogy for Kuminga is not the same, and then he bails.
Yeah.
But another reason why Kuminga is going to be potentially the best player in 4 years is, unless the game changes, and it could, right, to like these centers who can do a lot of things. Like Kuminga is a wing, right, and he can develop quickly, and he can do a lot more with the ball in his hands, and that's just the most premium position right now, and probably in 4 years as well. But yeah, in terms of importance, I mean, talking about the culture, talking about setting precedent, setting the tone, Steph in 4 years, I mean, he's going to be the most important player as long as he's with the franchise, I think, unless Kuminga all of a sudden becomes like an all NBA player in 4 years. I don't know if that's going to happen. And you make a good point about Wiseman being really important in 2 years, not just because of the defensive anchor, Draymond dropping off a cliff at some point reason, but also in terms of like one of these picks hitting big, he has the opportunity to hit big faster. And if he hits, all the chatter from the past couple of years, it's like they could take a little bit of a sigh of relief in the sense that like, okay, we're in a good spot. You know, like this guy is tracking to be an all-star, if not already by then. So I think that would be huge for just like the optics and the internal development of how this franchise is going into the current core's latter years. You know, I think that'll be like, it's like, oh yeah, okay, Wiseman, it's all going to plan. And then, oh yeah, Kuminga's coming on. And then it's at some point, maybe Kuminga passes Wiseman a little bit as the best player on the team. You know, I mean, man, that is like, we're describing like my basketball utopia, you know, my Warriors utopia.
Yeah, it's the dream.
It's like, yeah, like if it's an argument between who's more important, who's better, Wiseman or Kuminga, and it's not like who's the best player on a lottery team. It's like, the best player on like a team that's actually pretty good.
I mean, there was a part of me that was saying like, well, maybe it's Jordan Poole. You never know. Maybe he'll be their best player in a few years.
Yeah, then I think
guard dominantly. I don't. Yeah, okay.
Is CJ McCollum going to be the best player on the team? Is Jordan Clarkson going to be the best player on the team? Let's we'll see. But it is kind of fun to think about these young dudes and whether or not they all hit, or like it just takes one to hit, like you said. At least, you know, with Poole, he may not like hit all-star level, but like he's hitting as a legit, dependable NBA player who ain't afraid, who tracks to be like solid in the clutch, in those clutch moments, you know, and can be a 16-game player, right? And then Moody, even if he improves like linearly, like he will be a dependable guy. And then you hope that you know, Kuminga or Wiseman can really stand out. I can't wait till they play together in garbage minutes, man.
I know.
Like, that's gonna be that
over city and crazy day.
That is going to be, those are going to be like the most watched minutes for me.
So like we kind of talked about, this is the true off season. You know, most teams have kind of solidified their rosters. There's a few veteran free agents out there that will probably find some homes, but there are still some kind of bigger loose ends.
Brad Wanamaker? No.
I mean, there's another Brad who I think is going to stay in Washington, but you know, the big one, which we, you know, have already talked about, Ben Simmons and Damian Lillard. Can I just say that these two teams need to go find a room and consummate this and get it over with so we can just really have the off season? Because do you want to hear Ben Simmons rumors for another 2 months?
I don't, because it's the same thing over and over again. Nothing's changing because no one's playing any games.
Yeah.
right? Like no one's going to be like, oh, we need him. Like what? Take the Warriors. Like everything else we know about what the Warriors want to do in terms of like bridging the future and what their plans are, whatever. Like their situation is going to change from now until beginning of the season, unless unless multiple people get injured and they're like, oh, we need Ben Simmons. That's not going to change, right? So I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
I've said this already, but I will be okay with reading about how everything's going to hell if he stays on the Sixers for the season. Like I will watch that. I've said that. We've talked about this, and that will be actually entertaining to me. So
Yeah.
The chatter with the Warriors I'm kind of tired of, but like just seeing like this I keep saying dumpster fire, train wreck, whatever you want to call it, it's going to be entertaining. So I would not mind that at all. For me, it's just Warriors trade chatter because I like our roster and I like the homegrown talent.
Me too. Can we just tie up these loose ends? Let's go, Maury.
But yeah, like Portland and Philly, I think that's like the perfect match. I've seen various trades tossed out by journalists, fans, bloggers, whomever, and it just makes sense. Like I want to see Dame play with Embiid. Mm-hmm. Like, are you kidding me? And I think Simmons, if they can send over a couple other dudes to Portland and maybe some picks or pick swaps or whatever makes it work on the fringes, then that's a good starting spot for them, right? Like that's like just start it over. So yeah, like I think they need to get like a Motel 6 room and make it happen. Let's do the deed. Okay.
I mean, I think it's the only loose end that needs to be resolved. I mean, it's the only major one, and I feel like it's the only deal that's out there. So when you kind of see when that happens, and it tends to happen in the NBA, right? Like when it seemed like Harden to the Nets was really the only true pathway, it's going to happen. So yeah, let's see it. The NBA released their schedule. So the Warriors are playing the Lakers on opening night. So that'll just kickstart that whole dueling narratives, NorCal, SoCal rivalry. But I was just thinking just now, though, about the Christmas game, though, because that's against the Suns. That's going to be fun to watch. And it's going to be different than last year, because last year, Christmas was the first game of the season, right? Or was it the second? It was I remember because we talked on Christmas about the game, and it was so early in the season. I remember I said, because if you remember, Wiggins was really bad in those first two games.
Yeah, and I think the Christmas game was the second game because they played the Nets early in the week, and then I think it was the Bucks.
And then it was the Bucks game on Christmas. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And I remember after the Bucks game, I said, "Would you trade Wiggins for Buddy Hield?" And you said no, and you were right. So. But I'm looking forward to that Christmas game because it'll be really different than last year's. It won't be that early season. I mean, it was just a mess last year, but they'll be 2 months into the season. So I think by then you'll kind of start seeing who they are, right? And it's going to be a good test to see how they match up against the Suns.
Yeah, that's a good point because James Wiseman will have 2 months, you know, to see if he can actually play against DeAndre Ayton and see if he can actually prove anything. And will Clay want to come back for the Christmas game, or will he come back like in January or something? Knock on wood, no setbacks. So that's a more overall intriguing game than opening night, you know? I mean, they're both going to be really fun to watch, but you're right. Like, it'll give you an idea of the direction that they're headed in, because by then you'll see like how much people have improved, right? Like you'll see where people are at. It's not like they're going to improve a ton mid-season, and maybe we'll get like a Moody playing against Bridges, and it'll be like that Spider-Man meme where they're like pointing at each other. you know,
with their long arms. Yeah.
and their slow first step. We'll know if Chris Paul is falling off a cliff. We'll see all that stuff. All right, then. That is another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You can also listen and watch the episodes on YouTube at youtube.com/National Film Society. Hit me up on Twitter at Patrick Epino, EPINO, or at Oakland Warriors. Hit up Aram and tell him how much you love his takes at Aram Collier, ARAMCOLLIER. Check us out at oaklandwarriors.com, and be sure to tell your fellow Warrior fan friends to tune in and listen. And if you're so inclined, leave us a 5-star rating and say dope stuff about the show on Apple Podcasts. The Oakland Warriors podcast is produced by National Film Society and is a part of the Basketball Podcast Network. That's it. Music in this episode provided by Paper Sun. Special thanks to Paul Amardo for production support. See you next time, and go Dubs.